Team, welcome back. I've got a great guest with us today. Today we have Jonny Miller. Jonny is an exec coach, but which is the curious part for me is that he runs a business called Nervous System Mastery, where he helps people master their nervous system. Jonny, welcome in, mate.
It's great to be here, Pete.
Okay, man. Let's go straight in with this. Talk to me about what the fuck is a nervous system?
Yeah, what the fuck is a nervous system? Good question. Well, I like to think of it as your nervous system is the lens through which you view your life. So if you are in a, let's say, regulated, kind of grounded, calm state, then you have the ability to be intentional with your life. Like you have agency. And on the flip side, when your nervous system is in a reactive state, it could be fight, flight, anger, shutdown, collapse. It is very hard to keep that level of intentionality with what it is that you want to do. And living from a reactive place, it makes it very hard to follow through with, your goals, who you want to be. And so I like to share with people a set of tools and skills that allow them to return to that place of regulation and therefore to kind of have more agency in their lives.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was scrolling your Instagram and you got a great video on there, and you talk about this being like 3 areas that you can be in: the red, the green, and the blue. And we want to be in the green zone. Can you talk about those areas and describe them to the team?
Yeah, totally. So the red zone is hyper arousal, HYPER. This is where the sympathetic branch of our nervous system, this is like the activation branch. This can go too far outside of what is known technically as your window of tolerance. So some degree of activation is great, but if you go too far, it can turn into, anger, anxiety, overwhelm, basically like beyond your threshold to hold stress.
Okay.
And then on the other side, the blue zone is known as hypoarousal with an O. And this is basically the parasympathetic nervous system. You can think of this as like the handbrake in a car. If sympathetic is gas pedal, hypoarousal is the handbrake. And this is, we all respond to intense stress differently. Some people go deep into red, some people go deep into blue. And so a blue response would be something like when people choking or freezing or shutting down or emotionally withdrawing, disassociating, feeling numb. Like those are all like responses of hypoarousal. It's important to mention that these are both basically adaptive strategies that we learned as kids. They're kind of like hardwired into our nervous systems. They're not bad, but it's very helpful to know, like notice the signs when we're moving in that direction and then go back into the window of tolerance, which is basically the green zone. Green zone is when we are able to connect with other people, connect with loved ones, connect with ourselves, when play is possible, creativity is possible, and we're just aware of our physical sensations and we feel grounded.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just say that like we got in an altercation and we're having a heated conversation, and I can go one of 3 ways. The blue zone is that's essentially my freeze, or I'm gonna run off, and it's and I'm emotionally detaching from that. I don't know what to do, and I'm shutting down. Or red, I get hyper angry, maybe go from anger to aggression into rage. You're right, and it gets very, very heated, right?
Yep. And interestingly, in if you look at like long-term couples, typically one person's reaction will tend to be red and the others will tend to be blue. They kind of play well together. So let's say if you were the angry person, my response to that would often be the kind of disconnection, the shutdown, the collapse. And this almost like it feeds into each other, right? So there's ways in which these can interplay in human relationships as well.
Okay. So yeah, let's just toy with that for a second then. Just in a relationship. It's actually very worthwhile if we're in a relationship with each other. It's like me knowing how you react, like whether 100%. Typically if we get an altercation, you do go to red, and typically I do go to blue. And so it's worth knowing that. So then we go, right, well, I know Johnny's going to flip off the lid here and I'm going to retreat. And how do we meet
Yep.
in the middle?
Beautiful. Yes. And the other piece of that is building the skill of what's known as interoception. So interoception basically allows you to identify what are the somatic markers or the kind of early warning signs of like, what is a 2 out of 10 red or what is a 3 out of 10 blue? And once you're able to like, so maybe like a 2 out of 10 red might be, I'm noticing my heart rate's increasing slightly. I'm noticing there's like a little bit of tension in my chest. I'm noticing my palms are getting a bit sweaty. And, you know, typically if left unchecked, unaddressed, that might end up in like an 8 or a 9 out of 10. And the
Yes.
earlier that you can catch it, and then from there, you know, it might just be a few breaths. It might be you go for a walk outside. You know, it's much easier to kind of divert that when it's at a 2 or a 3 out of 10, as opposed to waiting until like the full meltdown when it's like it takes a while to come back from that sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. So like, what would be a good tool here? I've got an example.
Great.
So this week I was having a conversation over message with someone that I care about, and all of a sudden we quickly got into this altercation over something very, very small, and it was very much back and forth, boom, 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 back.
Mhm.
We will definitely be here, the red and the blue.
Mhm.
What would be the best thing to do? Like, is there tools here
Mhm.
to down regulate and then to think? Like, what would you suggest doing?
Yeah, man, totally. So there's 3 categories of tools that I teach, and I'll go through one by one, and you can kind of ask me questions if it's not clear. But the first category is the interoception I just mentioned. So like literally you being aware that, oh, there is some like charge in my system around this interaction. That's like step 1. And if people can't like track that, then the rest are almost they don't matter, because you know you're not even aware that you're in this reactive state, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first bucket. And the second bucket are the kind of toolkit for self-regulation. Self-regulation tools fall into 3 categories: top down, bottom up, and outside in. Top down protocols, practices are things like mental reframes, could be meditation practice, could be like I'm actually angry because I really care about this relationship and it's really important to me. Or it could be zooming out, like actually, you know, maybe next week this won't matter. There's a bunch of different like cognitive reframes you can do to down regulate the situation. The second bucket of bottom up tools, which are, in my opinion, the most underutilized and the most effective, leveraging your physiology to change your state. So typically things, I think breathing is the best way into this. You can do things like box breathing, 4-4-8 breathing. Even humming is surprisingly effective. It releases nitric oxide into your system, and you know, you can hum with an extended exhale for about 30 seconds and feel very, very different after literally just 30 seconds. You can feel the another practice is like feeling your feet on the floor, or like coming into your senses. So some people use like a 3-2-1 practice, which is like 3 things you can see, 2 things you can hear, 1 thing you can feel. And something about coming back into your senses also like grounds some of that intensity. So there's various bottom up practices as well. I can kind of share more if that's of interest. And then the third bucket is outside in, which also includes other people. So it's like you can change your environment. Like we are constantly co-regulating with our environment. And that's a fancy way of saying like we are kind of in tune with the people and the stimuli around us. So let's say you were kind of having this text message chain and you were like, by like a busy street outside in London, and there's like sounds and sirens and like bright lights coming at you. If you kind of walked into like a quiet cafe and sat down in a comfy chair and like had a heartfelt conversation with a friend, again, like your nervous system state would shift and ground pretty quickly. So it's not about any of these being better or worse. It's about like, what do I have access to right now? What's useful? And like, how can I stack these? Like maybe you reframe the situation, you do a humming practice, and then you just like go into like a slightly more chill space. And like,
Yeah.
pretty quickly your state will downshift, and then you'll be in a more grounded place to then return to that conversation from a less like triggered place, essentially.
And actually notice what you said at the very start there on self-regulation, on the reframe, the mental reframe. Actually, the way that you frame that is quite advanced. In that you said, I really care about this relationship. That's why I am feeling this way.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this from my own experience. And I know this from many guys that I work with. It wouldn't be that. It would be, well, she's fucked me off. And because she's done this to me, I'm fucking pissed off at her.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's right. It's like you're projecting and essentially passing the responsibility back onto the other person. Whereas what you said there was very, it was a very tune, because it's not because I care about the relationship. This is, I have made myself feel this way. She hasn't done
Yes.
anything to me. Yes.
Yes. So that's another key step, which is implicit in this, is owning your own experience and choosing to believe, you can debate whether or not this is true, that you are 100% responsible for your own experience and that no one else can make you be angry, can make you be sad. Like, yes, your system may be responding in a certain way, but it's actually within your locus of control to shift how you feel. And then I also want to add like the third category of tools I call emotional mastery or emotional fluidity. And this is the kind of like level 10 set of skills, but to the degree to which you can actually welcome and not resist the full spectrum of emotional experience that's arising, that is what ultimately creates freedom in people's lives. So let's say if anger was arising, like, can you be with and welcome and feel and maybe express to some degree the anger that's arising? Because sometimes I see people get really good at the self-regulation. Like, they will like nail the breath work, and every time anger comes up, they just like self-regulate it away. And it's, a lot of people, it's better than using, say, scrolling on social media or drinking a beer or whatever. Like, it's a healthy way to self-regulate. And at the same time, if you don't eventually come into right relationship with your emotions, then the intensity will just ramp up and ramp up and ramp up. So ultimately, the real skill set is like being with and expressing in a healthy way the full spectrum of these emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. Rather than, because I get that, because breath work is phenomenal and it's a great tool. But rather than just completely move the emotion out of the way and ignore it, is actually, well, really feel that emotion. I made up a recent practice. I made this up in the sauna, and but it's been great. It's been a great tool for me to regulate my nervous system. I didn't know I was doing this until I thought about it afterwards. But what I do is sit in the sauna for 6 or 7 minutes, and to the point where the sweat is dripping all over my face. And normally, I'd wipe the sweat off, get it off, because it's irritating. But I've started to practice just letting the sweat drip down and then feel the irritation and then enhance the irritation throughout my entire body to really over exaggerate it. So I'm really, really feeling that, and then zoom out and to completely zoom out so I can see me, I can see the sauna, I can see the drips of sweat dripping off me, and know that I do have the control to agitate it or take it away just with the power of my body. Which has been quite a powerful little thing I made up in the sauna about a month ago.
I love that. That's great. And that kind of speaks like another category of skills or practices, which is, I put it into the category of like, in what ways can you expand your capacity for intensity, which is the same thing as the window of tolerance that I mentioned earlier. So if you, by intentionally putting yourself into stress-inducing situations that are within your control, you can expand your capacity to be with that stress. So, a classic one is like ice bath, cold plunge. You are choosing to be in that situation. You go in, your body immediately has this like intense stress activation response. but you also know that you're safe, and you can use your breath to kind of self-regulate and actually relax into the intensity of the cold, which is the same skill required when you're in an altercation. You can like relax into the intensity that is the stress response that is arising, just as if it was a cold plunge. As long as, this is key, as long as you're not looped in and like hooked into the story. Because if you're like telling at the same time, telling yourself the story that like, she did this, blah, 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 and blaming, that will cause this like shitty loop, basically. So you have to stay with the sensations, both in the cold plunge and also in interpersonal conflict.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super powerful. Just going back to the relationship conflict again. I actually did have, I had another example actually the other day, and this wasn't conflict. This was just it was a strong conversation where we were just going a little bit deeper. They said something to me, and I was like, "Oh, that's hitting."
Nice.
And my response was actually, "Can you give me 10 seconds? I just need to breathe into that, because right now my brain is going with all these different thoughts,
Right.
and I can't think properly. But if just to give me 10 seconds, I can just breathe into that, I'll be able to think." And that really, really helped. And actually just vocalizing that to the other person as well, just letting them know, hey, I just need 10 seconds here. I need 30 seconds just to breathe. So I think the communication part is just as strong. The communication part to the other person is just as strong as you actually doing the practice itself.
Yeah, totally. And what I notice about that type of, I love that. And when you took those 5 or 10 seconds to kind of like breathe into that, I imagine that you were also kind of bringing your sense of like embodied awareness online as well, which actually creates deeper connection in the conversation as well. Because so often I do this sometimes in podcasts where like I'm just up in my head and I'm just like pinging ideas back and forth. And I noticed, and I just had a podcast before this where they got quite vulnerable and got into some emotional territory. And I noticed that like when I was in my body and kind of speaking from like, I'm aware of my body and my mind and my head and the space around me, that like, it felt like the connection was just more meaningful and deeper. And I enjoyed it more. And I feel like it's, particularly in men's relationships, we often, I will speak for myself, I often will speak from a very heady place. And it for me, it like limits the depth that relationship can kind of go into.
Yeah. What you just said there about being able to be in your head, in your body, in the space around you, in your awareness, essentially it's like it's advanced levels of consciousness to be able to do that. How have you been able to cultivate because that's super advanced, to be able to sit, because it's super, super attractive to the opposite sex, and it feels very, very safe that he is able to do this and hold this space whilst there's chaos going on.
Yep.
What's been your practices around cultivating that?
Yeah. So primarily going through a lot of shit. Like is the fast track. So let's see how to respond to this. So one of the frames that I think was most helpful for me was reading King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, which is a fantastic men's work book on like men's archetypes, like mature masculine archetypes is basically the essence of it. And connecting, like I connected those archetypes like head, heart, and cock, essentially. So head is like the magician, heart is the lover, cock or like belly area is the warrior. And noticing when I'm like connected or disconnected from each of those. And then if you want to, for me, the king archetype, the sovereign archetype, is the one that makes sure they're all in alignment, essentially.
Yes.
So noticing that when I was in my early 20s, I had a very strong magician. I was in the startup world. I was like, did well at school, all that shit. And my magician was like overbearing, but I was pretty disconnected from my heart and my cock. And so through, a bunch of different internal practices, men's work, retreats, just like self-inquiry, I was like able to get curious about like, okay, what are the barriers what is getting in the way from me like inhabiting my lover, from like giving and receiving love or vulnerability? And then like my warrior, like why do I feel scared to express my anger or to set boundaries? Why am I in these like people pleasing tendencies? And exploring that. And yeah, I mean, I don't think you ever like get there. I think it's always like, it's like increasing degrees of attunement and unfolding. But I like that as a framework for kind of like in any moment, I can kind of say like roughly where I'm at in each of those different areas.
Yeah. Yeah. That's strong. I like how you use the archetypes. Yeah, I'm very much the same. For such a long time, I think I more or less just had armor around my
Mm.
heart area. So then it would be like, dude, just so good at the business thing. And I'm like, yeah, because it's like I can emotionally detach from all of it.
Right.
But when
Yeah.
it comes to the relationships, it's like, oh, we want to go deeper with you,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and actually to go real deep, you have to be able to take off the armor and emotionally and get emotional,
Yeah.
right? And be
Yeah.
and be okay with that, which is the
Mm.
lover.
Mm. Mm. And I want to like add that like it feels fucking good when that happens. Like it's not for someone else in the relationship. Like being able to do that, it actually like it gives me the sense of like, oh shit, like it feels really good to like fully receive a compliment. You know, before I would just like if someone said something nice about work I did, it would just be like, yeah, great, thanks, or like, no, it was someone else. But like to let that fully land, uh, it feels good. I guess I just wanted to like throw that in there as well.
Yeah, yeah. We're like preaching to the guys. Yeah, open up. I got another. This is a question for me
Mhm.
because this is something that I'm going through at the moment, right? And I know a lot of the guys here are fathers. So
Mm,
I have a son. He's 3.5,
amazing.
and he's growing so quick, and a bunch of emotions, and
Mm.
his nervous system is crazy. It's beautiful. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And have you had experience with guiding fathers with their children around how
Mm,
to help with
mm.
just to give them the tool set to help regulate?
Yeah. So for context, my wife and I are looking to start a family ourselves pretty soon. And I was just on another men's work podcast with this guy, Dan Doty, Fatherhood Unlocked. And we specifically talked about the overlap between nervous system regulation and fatherhood. It's a big topic. I think what I'll say is like maybe an entry point to more like a deeper conversation is that the degree to which you are able to kind of regulate your own presence and not shame him in any way or make any emotions wrong, that will be almost like the best foundation that you can build for like having a healthy nervous system that is able to have a lot like a wide window of tolerance. For
Mm.
most of us, I'll speak for myself again. That wasn't modeled to us by our parents. They typically punished or shamed or certainly didn't respond well to like emotional outbursts. Um, Often because they were challenged by those emotions when they came up in themselves. So
Yeah,
first and foremost, it's like doing the work to come into right relationship with those emotions in yourself. And from that place, it's then much easier to welcome it and love it when your kid goes through these like emotional roller coasters. And it's important to point out that like children between the ages of like 1 and 5 really can't self-regulate. Like they don't
no,
have the like myelination in their nerves to be able to ground themselves. So they need a father or a mother to self-regulate and to co-regulate with, and that's how they learn. And that's
yeah,
how that wiring gets built.
yeah. Like I try with Leo, and he is good at this. And I wasn't a while ago. This was like 18 months ago. I was quite young
Mm.
when he'd fall over or he'd start crying or something would happen. He would cry, and I started teaching him
Nice. Yeah, cool.
to just like let's just breathe together, breathe in, breathe out. And it was so cute when he first started doing it because he didn't know how to breathe in and out through his nose or his mouth. But now he's been doing it for like 18 months. And, it's like, and
Oh, wow.
he'll stub his toe or like even he just won't get his way, and he'll cry, and I'll let him cry, and I'm like, right, mate, let's breathe together, and he will, and you can just see him just calm, and he's 3.5, right, and he just calms down so it's such a powerful tool.
Yeah. And so I love that. And the other piece that I think is worth mentioning is like kids are in some ways like our teachers when it comes to emotional fluidity. Like an emotion, the life cycle of an emotion is somewhere between like 10 to 20 seconds. And you see this with kids because they don't have the stories or the layers or like the judgment. So they'll go from like sadness to like anger and then like joy and laughter in the space of like 30 seconds. And that is what is capable, or like that's what we're capable of doing as well when we kind of get out of our own way and we like able to work through the tension and resistance that arises.
That's a really great point. That's a really and just saying that, like, we are capable, and we are also allowed to do that, because Leo does that. He'll like go
and we were
and
and
be happy.
we did at one point, right? Like we were all like 1, 2, 3 years old, and that's what we were like. It just often the conditioning that gets laid on during school or in those like teenage years, that's when the armoring comes up to kind of protect at different points. And it's not that the armoring's bad or wrong. Like I don't want to shame anyone for having that. It was necessary for that time, but learning how to kind of like take it off and to soften is a skill that is required if you want to have like deeper connection in your life.
Yeah, and difficult for a lot of guys. Like I remember about 18 months ago, someone said to me, "Pete, you need to soften, mate." I was once, fuck off. I don't. I'm all right, mate. Right, chest up. I need to soften. And literally a couple of months ago, I said it to another guy. But that can be the opposite to what many men are taught to do. Is we're not taught to soften, and society doesn't teach us to soften. It's like it's very much go out,
right,
drive, direction, assertiveness. Be the warrior, really.
Yeah.
And to soften is to what do we associate soften with? Well, soft.
Yeah, right.
Penis, weakness. And so it's like, no, don't want that. There's a lot of shame around that. So we'll just avoid it.
Totally. And I think something that I want to mention is that it's not easy to say like soften in the same way that like if I said to you like sleep, you're not just gonna like fall asleep right now. But what you can do is you can create the conditions for sleep to arise naturally. And the same with this softening. Like softening is like the natural result from a sense of like, oh, I feel safe and I feel like seen in this space. I feel like I'm welcomed and that all of me is welcome to be here. And then like the softening happens naturally. It's not like I don't do it. It's just like the natural result of, oh, I actually feel like safe to be me here. So I think like from the perspective of people who are like, trying to help friends or loved ones soften, it's actually more of like just fully welcoming them and not needing them to be any different. Because actually, if we're saying to someone else like, oh, you need to be soft, we're kind of speaking to ourselves. It's kind of like a projection.
Yeah.
Because there's like a part of us that is like uncomfortable with not being soft,
Yeah. Going back to Leo and the ability to go from having a tantrum to happy as Larry in 30 seconds, and he's forgotten about it, and he's just getting on with his day. Whereas, talking about myself here, it's like if there's something goes on with me, that is in my body. I'm thinking like, and I actually feel if I have a problem going on which I care about, like I feel that in my stomach.
Oh, totally.
For quite some time afterward. Like the event may happen, and then it'll be in my stomach for hours and hours afterwards. I know I'm not the only guy who experiences that. What do I do in that situation?
Yeah, right. So firstly, I want to point out that like you've already made the leap, the interoceptive leap of like, okay, this thing's happening. It's not only a story, but I'm noticing this somewhere in my body, right? So that's like the first step is like, there is a sensation here that feels like uncomfortable. From there, the exploration or the journey, let's say, is like, to what degree can I like get curious about this? Like I like the frame of courageous curiosity that isn't trying to fix it, isn't trying to change it, isn't trying to get rid of it, but just like what's here? Like what does this feel like? Is it like hot and red? Is it intense? And like even just bringing your like presence to that area, it will start to shift naturally.
Yeah.
And generally the practice is, so I think it's kind of like maybe helpful to give an example of, let's say it was anger. You know, just making this up here. Often anger, I think of this as like, if you imagine like a hose pipe and the hose has got like energy like running through it. The hose pipe can get kinked one of two ways. If it gets kinked one way, it gets repressed. And so then it might come out as like passive aggression, or like I'm not angry, like, but there's this like, again, like contracting away, and probably like a snarky remark or something sarcastic that comes out. And if it gets kinked the other way, it's like aggression. It's like the typical kind of, like fuck you energy. So the work is like, to the degree that you can bring your presence and awareness and just like allow it to move without tensing or contracting or resisting against it, then it just comes out cleanly. And that's when it lasts 8 to 20 seconds. And this was such an insight for me, was like, what I thought of as anger, as the emotion of anger, was actually my resistance to that anger. And the same is true of grief and sadness and lots of other like negative emotions that we think of. The negative aspect is the way in which we are like tensing and contracting and are resisting that feeling. Because when that tension and resistance goes away, the feeling lasts 10, 20 seconds and it actually feels fucking good. That's like the ridiculous joke of this whole thing. Like the way in which we suffer is like specifically the way in which we're resisting that sensation. And so then the skill then becomes like, okay, in what way am I like resisting this? In what way am I tensing against this? And that's when like the game is on, basically.
Oh yeah, that's nice. Yeah, so it's a kind of like exaggerating. It's delving into that feeling, that emotion, whatever's going on, exaggerating it so you can really feel that in your body and coming to terms with it rather than ignoring it.
Yep. And it might want to, something might want to express or move, or, maybe tears come, maybe there's like some frustration. Maybe this, like I do guided breathwork with people one-on-one, and the incomplete reflexes that get surfaced and completed are wild to witness. Like I had a guy who had a near-death drowning experience, and while he was in this breathwork journey, his entire body recreated that drowning experience with all of the movement, because our bodies buffer these incompleted experiences I think it's literally in the smooth muscle tissue, in the vasomuscular system. And so that's why you get people who are repressed. You see the tension in their body, on their faces, in the way they walk, in their posture, in their mental kind of patterns. And so when there is sufficient safety present, these reflexes get to unwind and the tension gets released, and there's a sense of like, it just feels so fucking good on the other side. It's like a huge exhale.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and what you just said there, actually, when you were talking about expressing emotions, you're like, get it out. You might need to, shout, scream, cry. That there, like that emotional expression, and then putting masculinity in that term, emotional expression and masculinity. How have you now? Because you work with a ton of guys, you work with women too. Like, how have you seen, like modern masculinity involving in terms of emotional expression?
How have I seen it evolving?
Yeah, like like have you seen more guys leaning into that and evolving into it, or is there still that like, nope, not going there?
Yep. So I can tell you what I've seen. And also, in myself, I'll maybe start with a personal story, which is, I remember specifically when I was doing a training, and I would like, anger was coming up for me. It was very clear it was anger, and I wasn't wanting to express it. And my teacher at the time said to me, he said, "You are loved in your anger." And I just like broke down bawling, just like tears streaming down my face, and just this like, shit, like I've felt unsafe essentially whenever anger has arisen. And I think it was connected to the fact that like I hurt someone in an like outburst of anger when I was a kid, and so I was like, nope, like don't do that again. That's bad, wrong, etc. Um, but in terms of how like the evolution of, let's say, like working with emotions, I think for a lot of guys actually, like many guys are learning to kind of um come into their kind of like softness and to come into their heart, let's say. Um, and there is a beauty in that because so many men, as you know, we've been saying, have been so closed off for a lot of their lives. And at the same time, there's a way in which like there can almost be, if they're only in their softness, then there can be a disconnection from like the warrior, from like the
Yes.
power. And that's what a lot of women, I think, are like seeking, that like they're meeting these like very feminine kind of like soft, like squidgy guys, and they're where are the fucking men, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not like don't go into the, because we need that as well. Like a warrior that's disconnected from his heart is also bad. That's like what we've been kind of moving away, but that's like the toxic masculinity that everyone talks about. But the vision that like I like to hold over kind of integrated masculinity is one of, you know, a man who has the capacity to be in his heart, to be in his lover, to be a father, to be, you know, loving for his son, and also has the warrior and the power and like the like the fuck no, or like I will defend like what I love. I will defend the people that I love and I care about. I will set boundaries. I will follow through with my word. I will stay in integrity. And that's like, that is also deeply necessary. And the path that I typically see is like the de-armoring starts to happen, kind of come into their heart, start to build a relationship with their feelings. And then the next shift is like, okay, like where's the warrior? Like, how do I show up? How do I find my fierceness, my passion, my like lust? And like in some ways there's almost like darkness down. There's like a power in there which can be scary if it's not also connected to like the the king and the lover, to use the archetypal language.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think on my experience and my experience of working with plenty of guys is what guys need to be careful of is going too far into the emotional expression, because it does feel fucking good, to be honest. When you start getting that shit out, it feels good. It's like it's such a release. You're so much lighter. But if you go too far, it then becomes this like, I just want to release everything, and you can fall into the trap of emotionally dumping on the people around you, and they might not want your emotional shit. And
Oh yeah,
so
yeah,
it's
yeah.
important to actually have the right environments to be able to express the right things, which is
Fuck
why
yeah.
I'm such a huge fan of men's groups and groups like what we run and the events that we run, because it's an environment where you can get around other guys, you can get that out, and then don't have to emotionally dump on the people that are closest to you.
Yeah, that's so well said. And having that, I mean, really what we're talking about is discernment, right? It's like, what are the spaces and who are the people in which I can kind of take the armor off and I really can like reveal to, and men's groups are amazing for that. And then there are times where like you might want to put some of the armor back on. Maybe it's like at like a work like boardroom meeting or something, or like
Mm.
you're showing up like for work. Like I don't think that you need to be, or anyone should be that open all of the time. Like there's like an inherent intelligence to this, but again, it's like responding appropriately to the situation that you're in and
Yeah.
noticing when you're over indexing on one or the other. Like I think for most men, as far as I'm aware, they actually could use more spaces like a men's group, or like maybe it's their therapist, or maybe it's someone that they can really like open up to and they can be seen in the stuff that they wouldn't normally reveal. Um, but yeah, like for sure, not taking that to every area of your life.
Yeah, yeah, because just going on to the archetypes. It's like the lover archetype, which is what we're talking about here when we go into emotional expression, has no boundaries.
Yeah, yeah,
That's not the role of the
totally.
lover. So if you fall
Yeah.
too much, and it feels fucking great, because we essentially we all want deep
hmm
love.
hmm
The lover has no boundaries, so we have to have the magician and the king to
hmm
be able to go, hey, there's some boundaries here, to not just reveal all and go head over heels here, and let
Mm-hmm.
everything go, and then not see issues that are there in front of your eyes.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah, yeah. What's okay? So a lot of the guys, and myself included, we love building things, we love building businesses, we love building careers. We've always got projects going on. How does nervous system regulation
Mm.
enhance that zone? Let's talk about the warrior side here. Like, how does
Mm.
that enhance that zone?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, your nervous system capacity is essentially like how much energy and life force do you have? And you can direct that, ideally channel that energy and life force into like expressing your gifts, whether that's business, whether that's art, whether that, whatever that looks like. And so I'm really interested in how do we increase I think about how do we increase our capacity and how do we increase our resilience? And I'll define those two. So capacity is like the amount of intensity that we can be with without losing our center. Um, that's capacity. And then resilience is how efficiently or effectively can we downshift from being like in the go, 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 getting shit done to then like rest and recovery. Because, if you look at like Olympic sprinters, they've created an art out of how do we rest well.
Yes.
Because when we rest, that's actually when the muscle is repairing. And it's the same with, the same with business. Like it's in the recovery, the downshifting periods when like the good ideas come, and it's when we recharge. And so having resilience in my mind is like, how can we retrain how to relax? Because many of us, men especially, really struggle with relaxing, particularly without relying on exogenous substances like alcohol, weed, drugs, whatever it is. And so treating relaxation as actually a skill to be cultivated, and knowing that there are practices like non-sleep deep rest, breath work, there's a bunch of different things, tools, which allow us to effectively downshift. Once the workday is done, we're coming home. We don't want to be that like kind of warrior magician, go, go, go. We actually want to soften and like relax. And getting really efficient in that cycle is, I think, what creates sustainability, and it's also what creates creativity as well. So that's how some of this nervous system work ties into, I think, what you were speaking to.
Yeah, yeah. That absolutely. I'm just in the trenches of building a planner,
Mm.
the Heroic Man planner. So it's a
Oh,
physical
fun.
planner. I've been working on it for a while, and it's
Sweet.
everything that I ever wanted in to like plan my life
Mm-hmm.
and just consistent, just be real consistent with just constant growth. But it also incorporates like state priming and regulation and like
Mm-hmm.
things to go into your masculine, things to go into your feminine. It's got everything that I've been learning over the last few years and the last 10 years in business.
Mm-hmm.
But, and where you were just talking there about actually when you get home from work or you're shutting down for the day, it's, you don't want your warrior. You don't really want your magician. So actually like incorporating tools to
Mm-hmm.
down regulate in your like evening rituals.
Yep.
And then on the flip side, in the morning to incorporate tools to ramp yourself up to
Yep.
prime.
Precisely.
Super important. And
Yeah.
hacks.
Yeah. So totally. So maybe I can give a little plug here, but I've just released an iPhone app called State Shift that is specifically for that use case, where it has upshift practices and downshift practices. The upshift practices, things like breath of fire, stuff like that, really get you juiced and charged in the morning so that you can focus, you can like bring your full energy. And then the downshift practices, mostly for kind of like that evening wind down, but maybe like you want to do an NSDR after lunch so you can then get a second wind to get more stuff done. Um, that's precisely what this is for, and it's kind of like my um easy like if this then that approach to just incorporating this into day-to-day life.
Yeah. Yeah. Just making a couple of notes there. I was like, oh, chucking in an SDR after lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The breath of fire. That's like, it's called ego eradicator.
Okay.
It's fucking horrendous every morning. and it does eradicate your ego, but it incorporates breath of fire. But damn, does it wake me up afterwards? Because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
go through pain. It just breath's going through
Totally,
you. Incredibly
totally.
powerful. Um, what's your experiences around breath work?
I mean, it could probably be a separate podcast, but I think of breathwork in there's two main camps. Like one is shifting your state, so like what we've just been talking about, like breath of fire or alternate nostril breathing or humming, where you're deliberately upshifting or downshifting your state. And then the second category is, loosely speaking, transformational breathwork,
Yeah,
and this is holotropic breathwork, conscious connected, rebirthing. There's a bunch of them, right? And this is essentially where you're looping your breath to create an altered state of consciousness where um, unprocessed emotions can tend to rise to the surface. Now, I think there's a kind of nuance here in that often, let's say if someone's doing holotropic breath work, there is a danger of blasting through your window of tolerance, disassociating, and someone might look like they're having a cathartic experience, but they won't actually be in their bodies. And so in my experience, it doesn't get integrated. And so it looks like this huge, powerful catharsis, but then nothing actually changes on the level of the nervous system. So
let's
if
just
you're,
step back a
yeah,
second there.
sure. Yeah.
Because you're a clever guy, and what you're talking about there might just go over the heads of, oh, what's he talking about there?
Okay.
So when you say someone's going through like a holotropic breathwork session, which is essentially, it's very, very deep somatic breathwork,
Mhm.
and they might miss what's going on in their body. What do you mean by that? Like, where are they going?
Yeah. So the experience that someone might have will be the so it's a forced inhale and a forced exhale is kind of what the breath
Hmm.
looks like. Um, Often a sign that they are approaching their window of tolerance in their nervous system is that they get what's known as tetany, which is like, I call it like T-Rex claws. So like you'll sometimes
Yeah.
see people with like hands up like this, start off as tingling, and then it'll get to like cramps, and it's not comfortable. And typically when that happens, they will also be either in their head or their mind, or they will have like their awareness will have like left their body, and the body may continue to convulse, to emote, to go through a process. But what I've seen, and I don't have research studies to back this up because they haven't been done yet, but I've seen that when that happens, whatever the emotions are, typically don't get integrated, and so nothing changes. So it might have been a powerful experience in the same way that, like, going to a concert, taking LSD, and it's like it's a wild ride. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's a good experience. But if you're going into it from a perspective of like, I want to heal my nervous system or whatever the intention is, I actually think it could be counterproductive. And in some cases, re-traumatizing people if something comes up, but it's not fully integrated. The way that this looks in a healthy example is when the exhale is relaxed and effortless. So the inhale is like the activation, the exhale is the relaxation. And when you can loop your breath in this way and actually stay with your experience, to stay with your emotions, to stay with the sensations, and then the catharsis happens, and then there's relaxation and rest afterwards, that's actually when stuff shifts. That's when the transformation happens.
Yeah.
And I get quite angry, frankly, when I see breathwork practitioners, particularly those that teach online, and they're not like there in person to kind of create safety, and
Yeah.
they really open people up in a way, and then shit comes up as it does, and then there's no one there to kind of hold it and be with it, and it's too intense for most people, because most people have a narrow window of tolerance because we live in like a dysregulated world. And so I think what people need, if they're going to engage in that type of breathwork, is the more gentler, nourishing, slower type of breathwork where they can stay with themselves in the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. And I too get angry when things aren't, when people facilitate things and then there's no integration, or there's no real safety, or there's no real thought process about what might come up and how to handle that. And yeah,
Yeah.
because it can be very traumatic, and if that's not looked after or integrated or processed properly, it can just, you go home worse than when you came into the thing.
Yeah, and
Um,
so I've worked with many students who have done some form of holotropic or even Wim Hof, and they've had intense anxiety, like been unable to sleep for weeks, even
yeah.
months afterwards, after some of these experiences. So I actually think that it's very irresponsible and to some degree dangerous not giving people sufficient context as to
Yeah.
like how powerful these experiences can be.
Yeah, and I've got just going back to what you were saying earlier about being out of body. Like, so very recently, so we on some of our events we do breath work. I have a facilitator that comes in and does that.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. But the last session that we did actually, which was in September, I did had that what you're talking about, that out of body experience, and I could actually there was Jesus, and then there was this goddess, and like I was
Yeah.
I was in another paradigm, I was in another world. Like I was on plant medicine. It was crazy how vivid
Yeah.
and just
Oh my God. Yeah.
and divine, how beautiful it was. But it was an out of body experience. I'd left my body. So, and that's what I wanted to explain to is like when you're talking about out of body, this is what can happen. But you can stay out of body for a long time, and if you're not, and what you're rightly saying is that being out of body, you're not actually processing the stuff inside your body. You're not. You're just having this vivid, lucid experience.
100%.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, man. That's that's powerful. Right. Well, one last thing actually. So, if you for a guy, most of the guys that are in our world very much like me, very much the family men. They may have been in self-development for a few years, right? This whole like emotional expression, nervous system regulation, breathwork's all super new, or they've done little bits of it. If you were to give one piece of advice to get them going, to go, hey, just do this, and I promise you, man, if you stick to this, like you'll see quantum leaps over the course. Where would you where would you tend to go?
It's a great question. I would actually say getting into the practice of designing and running experiments for yourself, because you can hear me talking, you talking, and the information was like go through, be like, oh, that's interesting. But unless you like actually design and create an experiment to test it for yourself, like it won't land and integrate in your life. So starting with the premise of like, I want to be like a scientist of my own experience, like an N of one, and then following your curiosity, like of everything that we've talked about, there's like tons of stuff here that you could explore, whether it's waking up every morning and doing a state shift practice, doing an upshift or a down, or doing a downshift practice in the evening, like that. That's a very simple starting point. An experiment might be, I'm going to see if there's a men's group that I can join and just like commit to that for 2 weeks, see what that's like. That if that sticks, that could kind of change your life. So I would really recommend like taking agency for yourself and designing experiment, running it, and then like reflecting on it and being like, did it work? Did I actually feel more relaxed or better? Or were they just bullshitting?
Yeah,
Like, and then it's like finding what works for you, and then continuing to iterate, and then honestly that process doesn't really end, but you fall in love with the process of experimentation, or at least I did, and that's why I'm still doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, I like that. Be a scientist, experiment. Yeah, thanks, man. What was the name of your app again?
So the app is called State Shift. It should be available on iOS and Android stores. And then I also teach a 5-week course called Nervous System Mastery. The website is nsmastery.com. And that is essentially my attempt to like distill all of the theory and practices and protocols that we've talked about today and much more into a kind of like 5-week boot camp that will get people kind of firmly on this journey of like experimenting for themselves.
Nice. Thank you, man. I'll link those in the description. Jonny, appreciate you, man. Thanks for the wisdom.
This has been great. I really enjoyed this, man. Thanks for reaching out. And yeah, this was super fun for me.
Cool. Top man. Guys, tune in next week. We'll be in with another episode. See you later, team. Hey guys, almost forgot. Check out heroicman.com, the website. If you want to join Heroic Man's membership, you can just do that immediately on there. Super easy. Or if you want to apply to join the Awaken Man program and go deeper, you can do that there too. Cheers, man. See you next week.